Hi guys. Firstly, thank you all for your time. This is our first agency webinar of the IR35 2021 reform series. Looking to take no more than 30 to 45 minutes of your time today, as I know it's really precious. I hope you're all well and business is recovering for you guys post Christmas. Just a bit of housekeeping. You're all currently on mute, but if you can just remain on mute throughout the call, that's fantastic. If you do have any questions throughout the webinar, then all we need you to do is simply put it in the chat. And we'll respond to those at the very end. And we do have some questions that were sent in to us before the session started. Without further ado, what I'll do is make a start. So what we're really looking to cover today is just a sort of some introductions as to who I am, as well as looking at who Liquid Friday are. Most of you are clients of ours already, but we do have some people joining us that we don't currently work with. We're going to look through what is IR35, obviously the reason why we're all here. We're going to look at how IR35 status is determined. We're going to look at the key tests that's used, discuss a little bit the HMRC CES tool. Then we're going to talk how the supply chain's affected, how you guys can then engage post IR35, as well as the risks, obviously, that are associated with this. And then we're going to end up, obviously, on a little bit about, Liquid Friday and why a lot of contractors do choose to work with us. So just to start us off, my name's Joe. I haven't met many of you, but I'm the head of group operations at Liquid Friday. I'm also an FCSA board director. I've got over 10 years of experience in the heart of the industry. I personally am really passionate about championing the needs of contractors, and I work quite closely with government through the FCSA, clients, and obviously the wider recruitment industry. I'm personally, my experience is in delivering exceptional customer experiences for contractors as well as clients in previous roles. I've been guiding Liquid Friday through its FCSA accreditation for the last 8 years. And I'm also an associate of the Chartered Management Institute and spend a bit of time mentoring and working with people in the local area down in Portsmouth. So who are we? We are Liquid Friday. We've been supporting contractors and recruitment agencies since 2006. We are an FCSA accredited provider of umbrella and CIS. So we sort of do the full range when it comes to payroll. But for us, that just scratches the surface. Our vision here is to make sure that everyone that we deal with feels good about contracting, and that permeates just through all of the activity that we do as a team, and every day-to-day decision that's made. That is always at the very heart of what we do. We have a reputation for friendly and personal service and giving a voice to the flexible workforce, which we use through our partners at the REC and FCSA. So just to start us off, what is IR35? So whether you're a client, contractor, it really is essential to be familiar with IR35. It's going to be the flavour of the month for at least probably the next 6 months. IR35 only applies to workers that operate through limited companies. So this is a question we get asked a lot. And is umbrella included? Is self-employed included? It's always the first thing I'd like to get out of the way. It only deals with limited companies. So you may know them as personal service companies or PSCs, but it only involves limited company contractors. And just to reiterate, it does not apply to umbrella company workers, direct employees on PAYE payrolls, or self-employed and CIS sole traders. So the legislation, IR35, is really just a really simple piece of tax legislation that looks for disguised employment. and it looks for those people that are working via their own limited companies. So in the eyes of HMRC, to keep it nice and simple, if someone is doing the same work in the same place in the same way as an employee, they should be taxed accordingly. The term disguised employment is important when we are looking at IR35 and we're doing any type of IR35 inspections or helping contractors and agencies guide themselves through these legislation changes. The term disguised employment is what we're getting at. This is what we're looking for. So basically, if you did remove the fact that the engager is working via a limited company, would they be treated the same as any other employee? Um, if the answer is yes, there is no difference between someone that's internal PAYE, someone that's maybe working through an umbrella, and a PSC, then it's likely that IR35 will apply, and it's something that does need to be looked at in greater detail. So this is a quote directly from HMRC. The aim of the legislation, I won't read it out verbatim, but the aim of the legislation is to eliminate tax avoidance through both PAYE and national insurance contributions. So at the moment, the way that obviously PSCs do structure their payments, most PSCs do pay minimal tax and national insurance, and this is aimed at looking to completely remove that benefit, and to equalize the payment between an agency worker, an umbrella worker, and a PSC. So this term employed for tax is quite important. Employed for tax purposes is not the same as being an employee. In the UK, our law around employment and taxation are two very separate things, and sometimes never the two will meet. But in effect, the employment law regarding whether you're an employee or a self-employed person, or an agency worker in our case, is completely separate to HMRC's tax laws. So being classed as an employee for tax does not mean you are an employee in regards to employment law. So it does mean that you will have to pay the tax as if you were an employee, but you would not gain any of the benefits that an employee would take. So things like holiday pay, sick pay, and then obviously the most recent example would be furlough. It's been seen as unfair by many contractors who were caught by IR35 in the public sector, and has given rise to several risks with regards to employment tribunal claims. So this is where contractors are now saying, okay, I'm deemed as an employee for tax purposes. However, I'm not receiving holiday pay, I'm not receiving sick pay, I didn't receive furlough, so I therefore want to be classed now as an agency worker, or an employee. So this is an area that we are watching really closely, and we'll obviously update as and when cases come through. So determining the IR35 status, it really hinges on whether the worker would be classed as an employee or not. So it's really simple. I always like to keep it as simple as possible. So if they are determined as caught by or inside IR35, this does mean, once again, that they are an employee for the purposes of tax. If they are outside or not caught by IR35, they will be deemed as to be genuinely a business in their own right, which lets them supply services in a business-to-business transaction. It's really important to stress, and this is something that does come up quite regularly, that the IR35 status applies to the contract or the assignment, if you want to call it that, not the individual worker. So you can't complete an IR35 status test and say that I'm outside of IR35 and sort of presume that's going to apply to you as a worker for every assignment you do. It does have to be assignment specific. So if an assignment is classed as inside IR35, what that does mean is the income paid to the limited company will be subject to PAYE tax and national insurance deductions like any normal employee. Just on top of that, to reiterate as well, it does also mean that employers' national insurance would need to be paid for, and HMRC have been very clear that that would not be deducted from the original rate. So that would be on top of any original rate that you might have. If an assignment is classed as outside IR35, however, gross payments are made as reflective of all business-to-business relationships. So in effect, if IR35 doesn't apply, then it's business as usual. There are two main factors which drive IR35 status that we must all look at and remember. The first is the written contract between the limited company and the agency, or sometimes the direct to the end client. The second is how it reflects in actual working practices. So what we mean by that is what happens on the ground. So does what happens on the day-to-day match what's in the written contract? It's very easy to write a contract that keeps you outside of IR35. It's quite difficult for end clients to necessarily fulfill all the terms of that contract. For example, allowing unfettered right to substitution. Who does determine IR35 status? Historically, the individual director of the limited company carried that responsibility at the moment. So up until the 6th of April in the private sector, that will be the case. They do that simply by submitting and signing off on their annual accounts and corporation tax returns. And then as part of that, there is a presumed declaration that they've opted out of outside of IR35. The fundamental change in this legislation that HMRC felt was necessary was that they didn't feel that process was as robust as it could be, or maybe didn't happen as often as it should. So the fundamental changes, they are shifting who has the responsibility to make the determination from the engager and end client, sorry, to the engager and the end client. So what are the key tests that the clients will need to really undertake or work with a partner to help them? There are three key areas of contractual law that you would look at during an IR35 determination. The first key test is something called mutuality of obligation. Mutuality of obligation exists, as it says there, when an agency or client has to offer work to an individual under the terms of the contract and the individual has to take it. So the easiest way of doing thinking about this is the majority of people that are on this call are employees of a recruitment agency. We are all obliged to come to work and complete work at specific times, specific place, and follow the control, for example, of other people. Mutuality obligation is basically our employers are expected to provide us with work and we're expected to do it. Within a self-employed relationship, that should not exist. So there should be no mutuality of obligation. Secondly, we then have personal service. Personal service, or sometimes known as the right of substitution, is where we need to work out if the engager is identifying an individual specific person that they wish to do the work, or are they looking for any person of the same skill to be able to do that work. Easiest example that we use here internally with our internal training would be, simply if you think at home you might have a window cleaner. Do you particularly want Joe Bloggs or Fred Smith to turn up and do your windows, or do you just want a window cleaner to come and clean your windows? And then last but not least, the most important of the three tests in HMRC's eyes is control. Control really is looking at how, what, when, where the worker carries out the job. So does the client control those things? It is quite reasonable that the what, which is often a briefing, we often have to brief a worker on what you actually want, when and where can have some control over them, because offices are open at certain hours, sites are open on certain days and closed on others. It really boils down to the how. So when HMRC brief on this, it's the manner in which the work is completed is what they're looking at. So is the person who's doing the work a skilled individual who understands the role and can simply go ahead and get the work done, or do they require assistance and training and control over the manner in which they do the job? In case law, this is known as a master-servant relationship. So just a quick recap on the in and out. For a contract to be classed as caught by IR35, the tests have to indicate an employment relationship in all three of these areas. So it cannot just be in one area, it has to be in all three. HMRC will try to establish whether the relationship is one of employment or one of a business-to-business service. Part of the test that they would also look at are the two further areas of case law. One is what we've got there as BIOR, which is business in your own right. This is where you would assess whether the business is a genuine business. So, for example, does it have a website? Does it have a domain? Does it have, does the person have business cards? Do they have insurance? Do they have more than one client? This is all the business in your own right test, and it is quite important, but not one of the key tests. And then finally, the final test that they look at is financial risk. So does the contractor take on financial risk? Most employees don't take on financial risk. So if they make a mistake, if they misorder something, if they break something in the office, it's quite normal that the employer would pick up the cost to put something right. In a B2B relationship, if your window cleaner smashed a window, you would expect your window cleaner to pay for it. There are many platforms out on the market that do help centralize and administer the mass testing of IR35. What we say here is just use some of these with caution. Some of them are not independent and they can often be quite expensive. It's really best to keep it simple and apply these rules yourself and see necessarily whether logic does sort of win out on that one. More about some testing tools. We have the HMRC SES tool. HMRC designed a tool to assist workers, clients, really the entire supply chain determine IR35 status back in the public sector reforms 2 years ago. SEST uses a series of questions to determine whether the worker is employed or a business in their own right. And it is the only tool that HMRC have said that they will stand by. But it is really important to note here that they will only stand by it if the information is proved to be accurate. So if there's a subsequent investigation and some of the information that was put into it was proved to be wrong, then they would no longer stand by that decision. But it is worth noting that HMRC do state that CEST is not compulsory. You don't have to use it, nor do they have a formal appeals process if you think the outcome is determined incorrectly. So that's something really important to remember. So just moving on to the supply chain. The supply chain as it exists at the moment is quite simple. It's we have the client here at the start of the supply chain where obviously the work is being completed. They will pass a gross amount of money across to an agency. The agency will obviously remove any margin that they may have and then pass on a gross amount to the limited company. At the moment, this is where the IR35 responsibility sits. So the IR35 responsibility is with the director to make that assessment. And this is where HMRC may feel that people are marking their own homework as such, because there is a financial implication to being inside IR35. If we assume that the worker has assumed IR35 applies, then a net payment will be calculated within their limited company. So what that means is they will have to calculate employers' national insurance, their own national insurance, a PAYE, and then they will pay the deductions across to HMRC, but they can draw that money down themselves and use it as they wish. There'd be no corporation tax, for example, to pay on that amount. The more commonly path that's taken is limited companies deem themselves to be outside of IR35, or the assignment to be outside of IR35. So they, in effect, don't have to deduct any PAYE, national insurance, etc., and their limited company will receive a gross amount of money to distribute as it sees fit. So that may include a small salary. It will more than likely include dividends, but obviously they are at a lower tax rate than employed income. Okay, so post April, what's going on? The IR35 responsibility is completely shifted. That is now with the end client. So they are passing down the statement determinations, the service determination statements down the supply chain. If somebody is outside of IR35, it's not a problem. It's business as usual. If the client does deem that somebody is inside, i.e. the assignment is inside IR35, they will still pass a gross payment to the fee payer. Now, in this situation, we have shown the fee payer to be the recruitment agency, i.e. the person closest, the entity closest to the limited company. And they will still be able to deduct their margin, but they will also be responsible for deducting the tax, the employee's national insurance, apprenticeship levy will need to be accounted for out of your own margin, as well as employer's national insurance out of your own margin. That will then leave a net amount of money being paid to the limited company, which they can still take out as a total payment. They wouldn't need to double tax. They obviously can draw that money straight away and use it. It's also important to note here that the recruitment agency would be responsible for paying the employment taxes across to HMRC and completing the relevant RTIs each and every week, or whatever payment cycle you're in. So engaging people inside of IR35, there are lots of different options that can be facilitated. You do have some contractors that are adamant that maybe just this assignment is caught by IR35, and they will do further assignments outside of IR35. So they are therefore willing and quite eager to keep their limited company going, and they can therefore be paid the deemed payment, which is the slide I've just shown you previously. So this is where the worker is paid through the limited company, but all of the PAYE and national insurance deductions, etc., has been removed. This is also important to note that the fee payer still has to find the employment costs. This is the employer's NI and the apprenticeship levy that we previously discussed. That would still have to be funded by the fee payer, and is something to pay sort of attention to. The second option is umbrella company. This is where the worker is paid PAYE as an employee of the umbrella company, so therefore the legislation does not apply. And the umbrella company, we would pick up the employment costs as part of the negotiated assignment rate with the agency. Thirdly, we have direct PAYE, the sort of definitely the lesser attractive option for an end client. This is where basically the end client takes on the worker as a permanent employee or a fixed term contract or something like that, and is paid direct by the end client as an employee. Once again, all the employment costs would have to be picked up here by the end client. So that would include holiday pay and sick pay and pension. That would all be picked up by them. And then lastly, obviously, agency PAYE is an option and something that you guys may wish to explore, but rates would have to be looked at for you guys to be able to afford the employment costs on top of obviously the pay that's going out to the worker. Okay, just a little bit more about umbrella for those of you that may not be aware of sort of how umbrella works. Umbrella is very different to PSCs, in particularly when it comes to money and sort of cost, if you wish to call it that. It's a margin-based engagement model. So what that means is that umbrella companies would only retain a margin when work has been completed. It is not a fee-based model, unlike accountancies. So if at the moment these guys are mostly paying accountancy fees of 150 to 200 pounds a month for processing and looking after their limited company, they would pay that regardless of whether they're at work or not. We, as an umbrella, would provide full statutory rights. This obviously has always been something that is a positive for workers. So that includes sick pay and maternity pay, paternity pay, shared parental leave, etc. But really came into its own during furlough. Umbrella workers, Liquid Friday umbrella workers, those that were entitled to furlough payments receive furlough payments. So we completed about £3.8 million worth of furlough during the initial furlough scheme. And you would not have received that if you're a limited company contractor being paid for your own PSE. On top of that, there's obviously the holiday pay. So they are guaranteed 28 days holiday per annum, and then the full suite of insurance packages of personal accident, professional indemnity, employees liability, and public liability. So all of this is completely cost neutral to agencies and clients. It's the rate that is paid to a limited company contractor and the umbrella rate is the same rate, because we all have the same deductions to take from that need to be taken. And you would not need to change change rates. We did see in the public sector some movement on rates. Rates were increased to keep workers in post. As yet, we haven't seen that in the private sector. So we will obviously keep our ear very close to the ground on that. But in the public sector, we did see some public sector, particularly TfL and some other larger NHS trusts, increase basic rates to take some of the sort of sting out of the new, as they saw it, costs. Okay, we then got the self-employment option, particularly construction industry scheme workers. So this is obviously people that work in construction and rail. Many contractors who are no longer trading via a limited company aren't doing so because they've been caught by IR35. They've simply been told that the supply chain no longer works with limited companies. So no IR35 test has been done. It's just that the end client does not wish to engage with any limited companies. Now that's a completely reasonable commercial decision for a client to make, and is fine. There's no legal implications against that. If they don't feel that they can work and engage and complete all these IR35 determinations, then they have every right to say they no longer wish to work in that method. What this does mean, though, is with permission of the entire supply chain, and particularly with the agency, we could consider self-employment, in particular construction industry scheme. We would still, as an FCSA member, we are passionate about this and getting it right. We would still complete a status supervision, direction, and control test, a status test here, to make sure that the worker is genuinely self-employed. But it's an option that can be explored with your guys' permission and the complete understanding from the supply chain that this is what's happening. Once again, it's a very simple margin-based model. You don't pay anything if you don't work. It's a very simple deduction of tax, so there's minimal risk to the supply chain because there is no loss to the exchequer. And we would include, as part of that, all of our CIS workers and self-employed workers do receive professional indemnity insurance, employers liability insurance, and public liability insurance, and they can choose to opt into our site and accident / personal accident insurance if they wish. So moving on to risk. Risk is probably why most of us are on this call. It's absolutely normal to be worried. So what we wanted to do is give you guys an indication and maybe some real world examples. Should HMRC assess that a worker has been given an outside determination and in reality is inside, then any of the outstanding PAYE and NICs, so national insurance contributions, are liable to be paid by the fee payer. Now, obviously, we know that it's actually the end client that makes this decision, but at present, and there's no future plans to change it, the legislation places all of the risk with the fee payer. So in that, and in most supply chains at the moment, that is the recruitment agency. So what does it equate to? It equates to about 23p in every pound paid to the worker. And that obviously will rise if they're a higher rate taxpayer, which unfortunately lots of these guys are, to 48p in the pound, which is a substantial risk. So in the case, if you have for simple maths, and we'll go through this in a second, it could mean that if you have 100 PSCs out, and they're all incorrectly classed as outside of IR35, then you could be liable for a total HMRC liability claim of 3.2 million. How we get to these numbers, number of contractors out, obviously 100, a pretty good estimated average day rate at the moment is £150, assuming that they only work for 48 weeks in the year. That comes out of 3.6 million. If it's incorrect, so the incorrect determination has been made, the potential tax liability is 1.6 million, and there is the option for a fine of 100% in the legislation. Obviously, at the moment, no one's actually gone through this yet. There hasn't been any cases for us to know this is actually going to apply, but there is in the legislation that 100% fine, very much like national minimum wage violations, can be applied. So from a total taxable earnings of 3.6 million, the potential HMRC liability for getting it wrong could be 3.3 million pounds. So it's a lot of money, probably would shut most of us out there. So it's a matter of getting it right the first time. This is also what is driving a lot of behavior. It's driving people away from PSCs and to really err on the side of caution and look at either deemed payments if they wish to continue their PSC, or looking at umbrella as the next best option. So really looking back at why agencies work with us, we're often asked, what's the benefits? Really, why agencies work for us? Simply, it just works. So Liquid Friday, we have been operating now for many years. Everything is designed to be seamless for both the contractor and the agency. So you guys can just get on with what's important, which is growing your businesses. We have everything in one place, so we are one of the only FCSA top 10 umbrellas, for example, that has partnered and created our own factoring business. So if you guys need help with invoice finance, that's something that we can do. We can look at DBS checks. We obviously handle both employment and self-employment, so it's everything in one place. And finally, probably the reason why a lot of you guys are here, Liquid Friday is a trusted name. We have been in the industry for over 16 years. We have great financial stability. We have fantastic people. We're knowledgeable, and we really know what matters. So we deal with thousands of contractors every week, and quite literally hundreds of agencies. Why do contractors work for us? So I'll just pick a few of these. Contractors choose Liquid Friday over our competitors for lots of different reasons. One of them is service. We do pride ourselves on our service, but we do offer things like same-day payments. So if contractors need the money sooner, then that's something that we can look at. We offer flexible pensions, which is quite rare. One of the motivating reasons that people do choose Liquid Friday is that we will not insist that you have to use our pension plan. We can and we will always look to pay into an existing pension plan through salary sacrifice to make it as tax efficient for them as possible. We have a 24/7 GP service that we pay for all of our contractors, because we know it's really important that they actually get out and do the job. So we want to make sure that no matter what time of the day or night, they can contact a GP in the UK and speak to them and get some advice. This has been used a lot during the COVID sort of pandemic we're going through. Payment advances, really, really important. Something happens, something always happens. There's always a car breaking down, someone needing a bus ticket, boilers breaking. So we are more than happy to help contractors out where we can. And then we have our Liquid Perks package, which is designed really for all of our employees to really enjoy thousands of discounts and lots of different special offers. So thank you very much for your time. I'm just going to see if we have any questions at the moment. Please bear with me. Yep, so we've got a few questions that have come in before, and we've had one more added. So do you think IR35 will be delayed again? No. In short, A, I wouldn't be wasting any of your time if I thought that, and B, HMRC have made it extremely clear that it is going ahead, and ministers have confirmed that recently in Parliament. What happens if we do not get a determination statement? It's a really good question. So if you do not get a determination statement through the supply chain, then you are able to pay out gross under the legislation. So you wouldn't have to deduct the tax and national insurance. Just obviously be maybe a little bit careful about that. Can people be paid to CIS? Yes, so we've covered that. If they've received a CIS, sorry, an IR35 decision that control exists, then it's likely to be no. If they had just no longer work with PSCs at all, then the possibility is yes. We would have to talk to you guys to make sure that is an allowable service. But yes, we can definitely look at completing an SDC test and then running through the relevant checks this end. Can we use statement of works? Yes, the statement of works isn't in the legislation. It takes you outside of the legislation. But statement of works is challenging, particularly if you're an agency or an umbrella. Statement of works is basically a way of working where you cease to be a labour only supply. So it has lots of very concerning elements to it. You can't just put a statement of works contract out there and stick to it. You do physically have to deliver what the statement of work says. So if your guys are out there and we've had this before and they're building a bridge, then you guys have got to build the bridge. And that means materials, you're ensuring to make sure that everything's right. That bridge is your problem. So yeah, statement of works in theory, get where you're going with it, but be very, very careful. Take very specific legal advice is what I would say on that, because there are lots of implications. How long does it take to switch to umbrella? So switching to umbrella is really simple. I know that Liquid Friday's best ever switch was 6 minutes. It really doesn't take long. We are dealing with hundreds and thousands of people affected by IR35, and yeah, it really doesn't take long at all. So a very quick phone call, an illustration if that's what they wish, and then it's a matter of filling out an application form and signing a contract. Okay, just have a little look. I think we have some more questions. Okay, worker PP, who's responsible if they're umbrella as an umbrella employee? So this one it seems like quite a reasonable question. It depends is the short answer. So in the standard REC terms, all this is backed off to the end client normally. And the reason that is because both you as the agency, Liquid Friday as the umbrella, we are not in control of the workers on a day-to-day basis. So therefore, we are not expected by the health and safety executive to be able to make the informed decision on what PPE is required. The actual cost of it is just a matter of contract. So if it's in our contract with you guys as the agency that we pay for it, then so be it. If it's in the contract with the client from you guys, which is much more common, then that's who would pay for it. Being PAYE, AWR will be relevant. Does the clock start from the 6th of April, or is it backdated when the assignment started? In theory, it would be when the assignment started. However, this is a completely separate, so if they did switch to umbrella, it would be a completely separate legal engagement, and that's something that we would be quite eager on. We're not looking at TUPE or something like that. So in effect, in reality, it would probably be from the start of the assignment, to be honest with you. But in theory, it's from the start of the assignment. So we would always find out really what's going on. How long ago did they start that assignment, for example? That would really have a major impact on that. So yeah, unfortunately not a black and white answer on that one. Okay, are there any more questions before we wrap up? No. Okay. So thank you all so much for your time. Yeah, I really hope you found it useful. We try to keep these as quick and short as possible, and hopefully without too much jargon. If you do want to know some more information or download guides, look at our, what we have available, please visit our IR35 page on our website. So we've got something called the IR35 Hub, which has some videos on there from the previous IR35 transitioning period. It has updated guides. It has a really useful buddy that you guys can have, and we also have hard copies of all these. So if you would rather read the documents like me, then please let us know. And then finally, if you need any help on your IR35 journey, please contact us or your Liquid Friday account manager directly. And we will most certainly help you. So my contact details are on the screen, and we will definitely get everything out to you. What I'll do, I've just had some messages. Yeah, we will send the slides out as well. That's not a problem. I've got all your email addresses. So yeah, we'll get those out to you straight afterwards. But thank you all so much. Have a fantastic day, and we'll speak to you soon.